He wasn't supposed to be home yet. That thought echoed in his mind as the front door closed behind him with a muted click, the kind of sound money bought when walls were thick and hinges were custom built. The house stood vast and immaculate, designed by architects who believed silence was a luxury. Normally, that silence greeted him like a familiar ghost. Today it didn't. There was a sound. Soft. Low. Almost fragile. He stopped mid-step, briefcase still in his hand, heart tightening for reasons he couldn't immediately explain. The sound drifted from the far end of the corridor, from the one room he rarely entered unless absolutely necessary. The nursery. His grip tightened. Every muscle in his body went rigid. For weeks now, his life had been reduced to contracts, late-night board calls, and one tiny human who refused to follow any schedule, any rule, any expectation. The baby cried constantly. Doctors blamed colic. Consultants blamed stress. Nannies came and went, all with perfect resumes and spotless smiles, all leaving quietly after a few days with polite excuses. This one was new. Too new. He moved slowly, steps controlled, mind already listing every security protocol he'd installed. Cameras. Background checks. References verified twice. Still, something deep and primal urged caution. The sound grew clearer as he reached the nursery door. A hum. Not mechanical. Not rehearsed. Human. He pushed the door open. The sight froze him in place. She stood near the crib, body angled protectively, holding his baby with practiced ease. One arm supported the tiny back, fingers splayed gently, while the other tilted a bottle at just the right angle. Her head was bowed, curls slipping loose from a tied-back bun, lips moving softly as if sharing a secret meant only for the child in her arms. The baby wasn't crying. That alone was enough to steal his breath. His son, who screamed through feedings, who arched his back and rejected bottles, who exhausted everyone who tried to soothe him, was calm. Completely still. Eyes half closed. One tiny fist curled around her finger. She didn't notice him at first. She was too focused. Too present. A flicker of something sharp passed through him. Suspicion. Confusion. An emotion he hadn't named in years. Control. "What are you doing?" His voice cut through the room, harsher than he intended. Her body tensed instantly, but her hands didn't falter. She finished the motion she was making, carefully easing the bottle away before turning to face him. "I'm feeding him," she said. Not defensive. Not apologetic. Matter of fact. "That's not his feeding time." She glanced down at the baby, then back up at him. "He was hungry. That's not how this works." "I know," she replied calmly. "But he needed it earlier." His jaw tightened. The words sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. He stepped closer, eyes scanning every detail. The way she held the baby, the gentle rhythm of her breathing, the absence of panic that usually followed his son's cries. "You don't change schedules without permission," he said. "Especially not in this house." She nodded once. "Understood." But the baby stirred, made a soft sound, and without looking, she adjusted her grip. A subtle movement. Instinctive. Like muscle memory. Something about it unsettled him. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. Her gaze flickered. "Just briefly. I've taken care of babies before." "How many?" "A lot." The answer was vague. Too vague. She placed the baby back into the crib with meticulous care, ensuring the blanket rested just below the chin, one hand lingering until the tiny chest rose and fell evenly. Only then did she step back. "I'll log the feeding," she said. "You can review it." She moved past him toward the door, posture straight, expression composed, but he caught it, the tightness in her shoulders, the way she exhaled once she was out of the room. He stood there long after she left. The baby slept on. That night, he reviewed footage he didn't remember installing. Not from cameras. From memory. The way his wife used to hum. The way she fed their son during those first fragile weeks, whispering nonsense words as if they were spells meant to protect him from the world. He closed his laptop abruptly, irritated with himself. The next morning, the house returned to its controlled rhythm. Assistants came and went. Calls filled the air. He moved through meetings like a man on autopilot, but his attention kept drifting. Every sound from the nursery registered now. When he passed by, he noticed the baby didn't cry the way he used to. The screaming fits had softened into brief complaints. Sleep stretches lengthened. Bottles emptied. And always she was there. Quiet. Efficient. Observant. Too good. He found her in the kitchen mid-afternoon, sanitizing bottles with careful precision. "You don't need to do that now," he said. She looked up. "I prefer to stay ahead." "Why?" She paused, considering. "Because babies don't wait." The answer irritated him more than it should have. "Stick to the protocols," he said. "I hired you to follow instructions, not reinterpret them." Her expression remained neutral. "Yes." But something in her eyes shifted. Not anger. Not fear. Understanding. That evening, he came home late again. This time, he didn't announce himself. He stood in the hallway, watching through the half-open nursery door. She sat in the rocking chair, the baby against her chest, one hand resting between his shoulder blades. She wasn't humming this time. She was whispering. "I know," she murmured softly. "It's a lot. The world feels loud right now." The baby relaxed further. He felt an unexpected sting behind his eyes. He pushed the door open deliberately. She looked up, startled this time, but didn't jump. "You shouldn't talk to him like that," he said. "Like what?" "Like he understands." Her gaze softened. "He does. Not the words. The tone." He scoffed. "That's not scientific." She shrugged lightly. "Neither is love. But it works." The word hit harder than he expected. He straightened. "You're here to do a job." "Yes," she said evenly. "And I'm doing it. Don't forget your place." Silence fell heavy between them. Then, quietly, "I know exactly where my place is." He turned away first. Later that night, after the house settled into stillness, he stood alone in the nursery again. The baby slept peacefully, fingers twitching occasionally, breathing steady. Something was changing. And for the first time since becoming a father, he wasn't sure whether that terrified him, or gave him hope. In the darkness, a single thought surfaced, unwelcome and persistent. If this woman could calm his child so easily, what else did she know how to do? And why did he feel like he was the one being watched? The tension didn't announce itself all at once. It crept in quietly, like a hairline crack spreading through glass. By the third day, he noticed the staff whispering. Not openly. Never when he was close enough to confront them. But he caught glances, quick looks exchanged in hallways, voices lowering when she passed, eyes following her movements to rooms she technically didn't belong in. The house had always been a place of order. Everyone knew their roles. Everyone stayed within them. She disrupted that balance without ever raising her voice. The baby slept through the night for the first time in weeks. That alone should have earned her gratitude. Instead, it made him uneasy. During breakfast, one of his senior assistants cleared her throat. "Sir, the nanny took the baby outside this morning." He looked up sharply. "Outside where?" "The garden. Just for a few minutes." "That wasn't authorized." "She said the sunlight helps regulate sleep." His spoon paused midair. "And you let her?" The assistant hesitated. "The baby stopped crying almost immediately." Silence followed. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor, irritation burning hotter than it should have. Rules existed for a reason. Boundaries mattered. Especially when the world already watched his every move, waiting for a crack to exploit. He found her in the garden, seated beneath the old oak tree, the baby cradled against her shoulder. Dappled sunlight filtered through leaves, catching on her skin, her calm expression, the child's tiny fingers clutching fabric. It looked intimate. Too intimate. What are you doing? He demanded. She turned, surprise flickering before settling into composure. He was restless. The air helps. You don't make those decisions. She stood slowly, adjusting the baby with care. He needed comfort. That's not your call. Her jaw tightened. With respect, he's a baby, not a contract. The words hit like a slap. A gardener nearby froze. A housekeeper pretended not to hear. His voice dropped. Do not speak to me like that. She met his gaze evenly. Then don't treat me like I don't know what I'm doing. For a moment either moved. Then the baby stirred, letting out a small whimper. She shifted instinctively, murmuring softly, and the sound stopped. That was the moment he realized everyone was watching. Later that day, he overheard a phone call he wasn't meant to hear. No, she's just a nanny, someone whispered. Yes, but you know how it looks. He clenched his jaw, anger flaring. Not at the gossip. At the implication. That evening, guests arrived for a small charity dinner. Nothing extravagant. Just enough people to remind him of expectations. He made sure she knew to stay upstairs. She nodded. Of course. But halfway through the evening, a sharp cry cut through the soft music and polite laughter. The baby? Every conversation stalled. He felt eyes turn toward him, curiosity barely concealed. He rose quickly, irritation mounting. He hadn't authorized her presence downstairs. Before he reached the stairs, she appeared. She moved through the room with the baby held close, her posture protective but unassuming. She didn't look at anyone else. Her focus was entirely on calming the child, whispering, rocking gently as she walked. The baby quieted within seconds. The room exhaled. Someone smiled. Someone else murmured approval. And then someone laughed lightly. You should keep her, a guest joked. She's better than most professionals. Another voice chimed in. Where did you find her? The question hung heavy. He felt heat rise up his neck. She's temporary, he said sharply. Her steps faltered, just slightly. I didn't ask for commentary, he added, taking the baby from her arms without warning. The baby cried immediately. The sound cut through him, raw and accusing. She reached out instinctively, then stopped herself. I'll take him upstairs, he said. Her hands dropped to her sides. As he climbed the stairs, the baby's cries grew louder, sharper. He tried rocking him. Walking. Everything the books suggested. Nothing worked. Behind him, he heard soft footsteps. I can help, she said quietly. No. He needs. I said no. The baby screamed. Guests shifted uncomfortably downstairs. Pride warred with panic. Finally, through clenched teeth, he said, Fine. 5 minutes. She took the baby back gently, her movements unhurried. Almost immediately, the crying softened. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. He watched from the doorway, chest tight, as she whispered and rocked, the baby calming against her as if she were an anchor. You enjoyed this attention, he said suddenly. She looked up, confused. What? You enjoyed proving yourself. Making people look. Her expression hardened. I enjoy keeping him safe. That's my job. She stood, placing the baby carefully into the crib. Then let me help you do it. The words lingered long after she left the room. The next day, he received a call. A reporter. Asking questions about household staff, about rumors, about a mystery caretaker, who had caught the attention of several guests. He ended the call abruptly, fury simmering. He confronted her immediately. You talked, he accused. She looked genuinely shocked. I didn't. You brought attention here. I stayed silent. This house doesn't need stories. Her voice trembled for the first time. Neither does a baby who cries himself hoarse. The words cut deeper than she intended. He exhaled sharply. You're overstepping. And you're scared, she replied softly. The room went still. I lost my wife, he said coldly. Don't presume to understand. She swallowed. I know loss. He laughed bitterly. You know nothing about my life. She met his gaze, pain flickering across her face. You'd be surprised. That night, the baby's breathing changed. Not a cry. Not a scream. Something worse. A sharp, broken sound through the monitor. He bolted upright in bed. By the time he reached the nursery, she was already there, hands steady, eyes focused, urgency clear but controlled. Something's wrong, she said. And for the first time since she arrived, he didn't question her. He followed her lead. Because whatever line he thought she had crossed before, the real boundary was about to shatter, and he could feel it. The sound coming from the crib wasn't loud, but it was wrong. It cut through the room in uneven bursts, a sharp, wet hitch between breaths that made his chest seize instantly. He crossed the nursery in 2 strides, panic rising like a wave, but she was already there, one hand on the baby's chest, the other lifting him gently, her face composed but alert. His breathing's restricted, she said calmly. Not loud. Not rushed. Calm in a way that didn't deny danger but didn't invite chaos either. He's not getting enough air. What do we do? His voice cracked before he could stop it. She didn't look at him. I need space. That alone should have angered him. Instead, he stepped back without thinking. She moved with precision now, all softness replaced by focus. She turned the baby slightly, checked his mouth, listened closely to each strained breath. Her fingers were confident, exact, as if following a map only she could see. He's aspirating, she said. It's mild, but it can escalate fast. Call an ambulance, he said, already reaching for his phone. Not yet, she replied. He's stable enough for intervention. How do you know? Because I've seen this before. The baby whimpered weakly. She adjusted his position, lifting him upright, patting his back with measured firmness. Once. Twice. Then again. Nothing. His heart hammered so loudly he was sure she could hear it. She changed angle, supporting the head, applying gentle pressure at exactly the right spot. Her lips moved, not prayers, not panic, but numbers. Counting breaths. Timing movements. Then the baby coughed. Once. Twice. Air rushed in, sharp and sudden. A cry followed, thin, angry, alive. His knees nearly gave out. She didn't relax immediately. She listened again, watching the rise and fall of the chest, adjusting until the breathing smoothed out completely. Only then did she exhale. He's okay, she said quietly. He collapsed into the chair beside the crib, hands shaking. You knew exactly what to do. She nodded. Yes. You didn't hesitate. No. You weren't guessing. No. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, and in a way, he was. Who are you? He asked. She hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. I used to work in neonatal care, she said finally. Critical care. Preemies. High-risk infants. The words landed slowly. You told me you'd taken care of babies, he said. I didn't lie. No, he admitted. You didn't. Silence filled the room, thick with everything unsaid. The baby slept now, utterly unaware of how close he'd come to danger. How did you know what he needed? He asked quietly. She looked down at her hands. Because I've watched hundreds of parents panic when they shouldn't, and ignore warning signs when they shouldn't. Because I've learned when to act, and when to stay calm. Why aren't you still doing that work? Her jaw tightened. Because I spoke up, she said. And someone powerful didn't like it. He leaned forward. Spoke up about what? Unsafe practices. Cost-cutting measures that endangered infants. I reported it. And? They investigated, she said bitterly. Quietly. Nothing changed. But my contract wasn't renewed. References disappeared. Doors closed. That's not how it works. She met his eyes. It is when the hospital's donors sit on regulatory boards. The truth of that stung in a way he didn't expect. You could have told me, he said again. You would have Googled my name, she replied softly, and seen the articles that framed me as difficult, uncooperative, emotionally involved. He swallowed. They always punish women who care too much, she continued. Especially when we don't look the way people expect professionals to look. The implication hung heavy between them. He thought of the assumptions he'd made. The way he'd spoken to her. The control he'd clung to as if it were protection rather than fear. I didn't trust you, he admitted. I know. Why stay? She glanced at the crib. Because he needed someone who wouldn't give up on him. That night he didn't sleep. He sat in the nursery, watching the baby breathe, every rise and fall now precious. She remained nearby, silent but present, ready if needed. At dawn, he brought her coffee. She looked surprised. You didn't have to. I wanted to. He hesitated, then added, I was wrong. She didn't respond immediately. I treated you like a risk, he continued, when you were the one thing keeping him safe. Her voice was steady but tired. People with power often confuse control with care. The words stayed with him long after she left the room. Over the next few days, everything shifted. He asked questions instead of issuing orders. He listened when she spoke. He noticed how the baby responded not just to her touch, but to her voice, her presence, the way she anticipated needs before they became problems. And slowly, he let himself step back. One afternoon, while watching her guide the baby through gentle exercises, he said, You should be back in medicine. She smiled faintly. Maybe someday. I could help. She looked up sharply. Why would you? Because you saved my son. And because the system failed you. The offer wasn't charity. It was respect. That night, he reviewed her full history. Not the sanitized version he'd been given, but the truth. Complaints. Whistleblower reports. Legal threats quietly buried. Rage simmered beneath his calm. By morning, he made calls. Power answered power. Weeks later, a letter arrived. An apology. An offer. A reinstatement, public this time. She held the letter with trembling hands. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say yes, he replied. If you want. She looked at the baby, asleep against her shoulder. I don't want to leave him. You don't have to, he said. Not completely. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, gratitude, trust, something warmer and far more dangerous. Because the line between employer and something else had already blurred. And neither of them wanted to step back. Not now. Not after everything they'd survived. And as the baby stirred, reaching for her instinctively, he realized the truth he'd been avoiding since that first moment in the doorway. She hadn't just saved his son. She had already changed his life. And the final choice, the one that would define all three of them, was still ahead. The house no longer felt like a fortress. That realization came to him slowly, not as a single moment but as a series of small, undeniable changes. The echoing halls softened with laughter, quiet, breathy laughter from a baby who had finally learned the comfort of routine. Sunlight lingered longer in rooms that once felt cold. Even the staff moved differently now, less rigid, less afraid to breathe. And at the center of it all was her. Not commanding. Not claiming space. Simply belonging in it. The morning the letter went public, the news broke before breakfast. Headlines framed it as a redemption story, a quiet correction of a wrong that should never have happened. A respected medical board admitted error. An investigation reopened. A hospital quietly removed 2 executives. Her name was restored. He watched her read the article on her phone, fingers trembling just slightly. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply closed her eyes for a long moment, as if letting the weight of years finally slip from her shoulders. They apologized, she said softly. They had to, he replied. She looked up at him. You didn't do this for credit. No, he said. I did it because I was ashamed. The honesty surprised them both. Later that day, she prepared the baby's bottle as she always did, unhurried, attentive, humming that same tune he'd heard on the first night. He leaned against the doorway, watching. "I've been offered my position back," she said without turning. "Full reinstatement. Higher pay. Public acknowledgement. That's good." "It is." She paused. "But it's in another city." The words landed heavier than expected. "You should take it," he said after a moment. She nodded slowly. "I think so too." Silence stretched between them, thick and complicated. That night, he held his son longer than usual, memorizing the warmth, the weight. He realized how much of his fear had been disguised as control. How tightly he'd clung to routine because grief had robbed him of certainty. She knocked softly on the doorframe. "I'll start transitioning him tomorrow," she said. Slowly. His chest tightened. "You don't have to rush." She smiled sadly. "Goodbyes hurt more when you delay them." He slept poorly, dreams tangled with memories of hospital rooms, tiny hands wrapped around his finger, the sound of a woman humming in the dark. The following afternoon, the baby cried in a way he hadn't heard in weeks. Not hunger. Not discomfort. Fear. He rushed to the nursery and found her standing there, coat in hand, eyes wet, trying to soothe him while holding herself together. "He knows," she whispered. "Babies always do." Something inside him broke open. "Stay," he said. She looked at him, startled. "You don't mean that." "I do," he said. "Not because I need help. Because we—" He stopped, choosing his words carefully. "Because this house is his home. And you're part of that." Her voice shook. "I can't give up my career again. I wouldn't ask you to. I won't be dependent." "You won't be," he said firmly. "You'll be respected." She searched his face, looking for conditions for control. She found none. That evening, they sat together on the nursery floor, backs against the wall, watching the baby sleep between them. "I was angry when I first met you," he admitted quietly. "Not at you. At the world. At myself." "I know," she said. "I judged you," he continued. "I made assumptions I didn't want to admit." She nodded. "People always do. I don't want my son to grow up thinking power makes him right," he said. "I want him to know kindness matters more." She smiled faintly. "Then teach him." Weeks passed. She accepted a consulting role that allowed her to split time between hospitals and home. He adjusted his schedule without complaint. They learned each other's rhythms, not as employer and employee, but as two people navigating something fragile and new. The first time she laughed freely in the kitchen, he realized how rare that sound had been in his life. The first time she corrected him without hesitation, he welcomed it. The first time the baby reached for him instead of her, she beamed with pride instead of jealousy. One evening, as rain tapped against the windows, she sat beside him on the couch, exhaustion settling in after a long day. "You know," she said quietly, "when I first arrived here, I expected to be gone within a week." "So did I," he admitted. She glanced at him. "You scared me." He smiled wryly. "You challenged me." The baby stirred, then settled again, fingers curling instinctively around both of theirs. Months later, during a charity event far grander than the first, a guest leaned close and whispered, "She's incredible." "Lucky man." He didn't correct them. He simply watched her across the room, confident, respected, no longer invisible. When she caught his gaze, she smiled. Not out of obligation. Out of choice. That night, as he stood once again in the doorway of the nursery, he thought back to the moment everything had changed. The suspicion. The fear. The question that had echoed in his mind. What was she doing with his baby? Now he knew. She was feeding more than hunger. She was feeding trust. Healing. A future he hadn't believed he deserved. And as his son slept peacefully between them, he understood the truth that had taken him far too long to see. Sometimes, the unexpected doesn't arrive to take something from you. Sometimes it comes to give everything back.